Thank you for joining us this evening for the Pink Agenda's TPA Talks on the Agenda, Understanding the Risks of Breast Cancer. Please welcome TPA Vice President Sam Golkin-Niliazzo.
Good evening and welcome to TPA Talks on the Agenda, Understanding the Risks of Breast Cancer. I'm Samantha Golkin-Niliazzo, and I am proud to be the Pink Agenda's Vice President and co-chair of the Education Committee. I'm also a breast cancer survivor. I was diagnosed when I was 30 years old after advocating with my doctors to receive biannual screenings in my 20s because of my level of risk. I lost my mother to the disease when she was 35, so I've known since I was young that breast cancer does not discriminate based upon age. I use this knowledge to take control of my health. Since joining the Pink Agenda in 2014, I've been able to share my story to help further our mission of raising awareness of the disease among young professionals. Through our speaker series program, TPA has informed thousands of young adults that they can be diagnosed in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, and we share important breast cancer statistics in a relatable and basic way. We also know that breast cancer journeys are unique. Treatments are not the same, and friends and family who are diagnosed prefers different types of support. Researchers funded by TPA and our partner, the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, are investigating new ways to prevent, treat, and cure this disease from every angle. We created TPA Talks to showcase these perspectives, and now with TPA Talks on the agenda, we're diving deeper into breast cancer topics that are especially relevant to our supporters. These events would not be possible without the leadership of the Pink Agenda's Education Committee or the support of tonight's sponsor, Kendra Scott. We are always so incredibly grateful for Kendra Scott's continued commitment to breast cancer research and giving back in a meaningful way. Thank you. Breast cancer continues to be the most commonly diagnosed cancer in the world, with nearly 287,000 new cases in the US alone this last year, and it is clear that our work is not yet done. More alarmingly, within our own community, there was a 32% increase of metastatic breast cancer diagnoses in women aged 25 to 39 between 2009 to 2015. The Pink Agenda approaches these major problems from two different angles: through the research we fund and through educational programming designed to reach this population. Tonight, we ask you to join us in moving this work forward. At any time, you can take out your cell phone and text the phrase TPA Talks, no spaces, to the number 44321 and to receive a secure link to donate. This phrase and phone number is also listed in the digital program booklet you received in your email. We are so fortunate to have incredible panelists this evening, and I know that they will inspire you to be part of this game-changing process. Thank you in advance. I'm looking forward to their conversation, which will be moderated by my sister, Allie Meng. Allie is a board-certified holistic health coach and owner and founder of the women's health coaching business, The Balanced Beauty, which she created to empower, encourage, and inspire women to make healthy choices. Allie is also a multi-award-winning actress and filmmaker. She appeared in the Emmy-nominated series of Making a Scene with James Franco, ABC's Quantico, various roles in TV and feature films, and is currently in film festivals around the country for her latest role as Megan in the upcoming comedy series Ingeniouses. Like many of us here tonight, Allie's advocacy for breast cancer research is rooted in personal experience. With our family history of the disease, speaking on and learning about the risks of breast cancer has always been on the forefront of her mind. She even began screening in her early 20s. Allie is a champion for young women to be proactive and to make informed decisions about their own health, as well as to surround themselves with a supportive network of friends and family who can help inform them. Her work in both health coaching and acting is to help fulfill her desire to leave a positive mark on the world and uplift others. It is my pleasure to welcome Allie Meng to kick off tonight's conversation. Allie?
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. I'm honored to be here tonight moderating this session. As you just heard, this is a topic that is very personal to me. With my family history of the disease, I know just how important this conversation is. So with that, let's jump right in and let's get started. We're here to talk about understanding the risks of breast cancer. Breast cancer is now the most common cancer worldwide, surpassing lung cancer for the first time in 2020, with an expected 2.3 million new cases each year. Female breast cancer incidence rates have slowly been increasing about 0.5% per year since the mid-2000s, likely due to the multiple factors, including a decline in fertility rates and an increase in excess body weight. Researchers have long recognized that understanding the factors that increase an individual's risk of breast cancer is key to personalizing risk prediction and prevention. For younger people who may just be starting out their careers or navigating new relationships, it's crucial that they have access to the information and support, both medically and emotionally, so they're empowered to make decisions with confidence. We are so fortunate tonight to have an incredible panel. These experts tonight are here to discuss these very topics. And with that, we're jumping in by introducing you to Dr. Graham Colditz. Dr. Colditz is an epidemiologist and public health expert with a long-standing interest in the causes and prevention of chronic disease, particularly in women. With a commitment to identifying strategies for prevention of breast cancer, Dr. Colditz studies benign breast disease and other markers for risk of breast cancer. His research continues to focus on the childhood and adolescent periods in women's lives and the prevention of breast cancer. He is among the most highly cited medical researchers in the world. Dr. Colditz developed the award-winning Your Disease Risk website, which provides tailored prevention messages to the public. He has published over 1,100 peer-reviewed publications, 6 books, and contributed to reports for the National Academy of Medicine and the National Academies of Science. He received the ACS Medal of Honor in 2011 and top awards from the AACR and ACSO, all recognizing his research in cancer prevention and control. Hi, Dr. Colditz.
Hi, Ali. It's really wonderful to be here with you tonight. Such an honor.
Such an honor to be with you. Thank you so much. Next up is Dr. Dorea El-Ashry. Dr. El-Ashry is the Chief Scientific Officer at the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, working with the BCRF Scientific Advisory Board to directly influence the course of breast cancer research around the world, leading a multi-million-dollar grant program and serving as a breast cancer expert and spokesperson. She came to the BCRF after a 30-year career in breast cancer research, much of which focused on finding novel therapies for aggressive breast cancer subtypes and to prevent and treat metastatic breast cancer. We've had a 43% decline in breast cancer mortality since 1989, and this can be attributed to earlier detection and more effective therapies. She believes we need better methodologies and ways of assessing risk in women under 40, like myself. Prevention of breast cancer is a pillar of urgency for the BCRF. It's great to see you, Dr. El-Ashry. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ali. It's wonderful to be here and be on this panel with you and Graham and with Alan.
Yes, our next up, thank you. Rounding out our incredible panel is Alan Rose. As a 24-year-old Miss America contestant, Alan Rose made headlines with a decision to undergo a preventative double mastectomy after losing her mother, as well as her grandmother and great aunt to breast cancer. This was a difficult decision for Alan, being thrown into the beauty industry at such a young age and having so much of her career focused on public appearances and how she looked. 6 months after Alan's decision to undergo her prophylactic surgery, Angelina Jolie had a similar experience and shared it with the world. Alan went on to become the first woman with a mastectomy to model for Sports Illustrated's swimsuit issue. She is now the founder of The Proviver, a nonprofit dedicated to providing comprehensive information regarding mastectomy and reconstruction choices, genetic testing, as well as providing access to the essential items needed for a smooth recovery. Her story inspired a new generation of women to take charge of their healthcare choices. Alan finds it rewarding to be able to partner with organizations like the Pink Agenda to inform others about the risks of this disease. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be a great conversation. Thank you all for joining. And now let's just jump in with these questions. All right, let's start with Dr. El-Ashry. What are considered some of the risk factors for breast cancer?
Yes, so there are many risk factors for breast cancer, and the story is quite complex with interactions among them. Let's go first over the risk factors that you actually can't do anything about. They're just there. And these include getting older. So we know that cancer increases with age, and most breast cancer diagnoses actually happen in women over the age of 50, even though we all know here that younger women can get breast cancer too. Another thing you can't change is genetic mutations. So if you have a family history and have genetic mutations in the most well-known breast cancer genes, BRCA1 and BRCA2, but there are also additional ones that we'll talk about later. Those increase your risk for getting breast cancer. And along with that is a family history. So family history of breast cancer or ovarian cancer in a first-degree relative, so your mother, sister, and or in multiple family members of both breast and or ovarian cancer can also raise your risk for getting breast cancer. And then some other ones that might not be as common. Oh, well, one more that is actually quite common is having dense breasts. So 40% of women over the age of 40 have what are called dense breasts, and this both makes mammography not quite as able to see a tumor that might be in the breast, but also it does elevate risk for breast cancer itself, having dense breasts. And then if you have had previous treatment using radiation therapy, so for example, non-Hodgkin's Hodgkin's lymphoma, and you were treated with radiation therapy, or if your mother or you, and in this case it would be none of you, but if your mother had been treated with a drug called diethylstilbestrol, which was used from 1940 to 1971 to prevent miscarriages, and so we don't use that anymore, but daughters born of mothers who used that had an elevated risk of breast cancer. So those are the ones that you can't do anything about, but there are risk factors you can do something about. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one, which is your reproductive history. And that's based on the age you start getting periods or menarche and the age at which you go through menopause. If you start earlier and then go through menopause at a later age, that extends the number of years of exposure to hormones like estrogen and progesterone. But then if we go to these risk factors that you can actually change, like being physically active, and you'll hear more about that from our panelist, Graham, and being overweight or having problems with obesity. All of these things can be something that can be worked on and are known risk factors for having breast cancer. And along with that is reproductive history, again, that you could do something about now, and that is waiting to have a first child or not having children. Both of those raise your risk of breast cancer. So if you don't have any children, you keep that extended exposure to hormones. And if you wait to have your first child till you're older, that also raises your risk of getting breast cancer. Taking hormones, so certain exogenous hormones like hormone replacement therapy, and that came out of the large WHI trial, and that was a combined hormone replacement therapy with estrogen and progestins, which was the common one called Prempro, that a lot of women in menopause took and raised risk for breast cancer. And then finally, drinking alcohol. We know that alcohol and any amount of alcohol raises risk. And so again, that's another factor that you can do something about. But we also know that the biggest thing women can do to help prevent or diagnose breast cancer early, and diagnosing it early we know is very important, is to be screened. And for younger women who are below the age of 40, they aren't being screened with traditional mammography screening methodologies. And so we know then that we need to do better at risk assessment and risk assessment tools for younger women. And this is a big area of research for BCRF, and certainly an area of research for Graham, and that you'll hear about when he talks.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Everything you just mentioned. I'm someone who is absorbing this information because it hits home completely. For those listening, I started my screening in my young 20s because I had access to a high-risk surveillance program because of my mother passing away and my sister having the diagnosis at 30. So I feel very fortunate to be able to screen so early, and we know that early detection is the best prevention. Well, Dr. Kolditz, why don't you talk to us a little bit about lifestyle factors that play a large role in breast cancer prevention? What are some of the most common things or things that people can do to prevent a diagnosis?
Thanks, Sally. And Dorea just really nicely broke out the factors we can't change. We can't change our parents. We can't change some of these, but we can change our physical activity. We can monitor weight and avoid weight gain, work to avoid weight gain, avoiding alcohol, zero is best. These are factors that we can change, and there's really no time in life that's too late to do this, from early childhood through even after breast cancer. These physical activity still has a major impact on survival, on quality of life. And so building physical activity, weight management, and then diet comes in because it plays into weight, and the high fruits and vegetables.
You mentioned fruits and vegetables. Are there specific foods that might be incorporated into diets to mitigate breast cancer risk or reoccurrence?
Yeah, sure. That's a great segue to, we've seen that peanuts consumed are quite powerfully protective, that colored vegetables are protective, particularly promising against the triple negative breast cancer, the subset of breast cancer we have least options for treatment. And then in general, high fiber diets, fruits, vegetables, whole grain products, again, particularly in adolescence and early adult years, we've shown that sort of combination actually lowers risk of developing pre-malignant breast lesions, and that clearly translates then to lower risk of invasive breast cancer later on if we're starting the prevention early.
Mm-hmm. And I know it was mentioned alcohol can be pretty detrimental. So can you talk a little bit about that and why it plays such a particular, factor in increased risk?
Great question. The alcohol intake clearly has an impact on circulating estrogen levels. Alcohol itself has toxic activity on DNA and can cause cell damage. So alcohol is actually a risk factor for multiple cancers. Mm-hmm. And really, as far back as the 1980s, we were showing from the Nurses' Health Study that the alcohol consumption increased future risk of breast cancer. We've looked more recently in late adolescence, early adult years, and there's again a powerful effect even then for risk of breast cancer. So I actually think the world is moving to a set of prevention messages that really starts with zero is best for alcohol. We know prohibition doesn't work, right? So it's silly to say zero forever, but a much more controlled focus, using alcohol for celebration, not every night, will certainly contribute at risk reduction.
Definitely. Well, with that, I want to bring Alan into this conversation. And, Alan, you've had a significant history with breast cancer in your family. To remind our audience, after losing your mother, grandmother, and great aunt to breast cancer by the age of 16, you made it your mission to educate yourself and others on how to prevent breast cancer. And you decided personally to undergo a double mastectomy, a prophylactic procedure at 24. So with this in mind, as a young woman, how did you approach making this decision? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think anyone can imagine as a young woman, it was a really challenging decision to undergo a preventative surgery like that. And I always like to joke I was a late bloomer. So when my dad sat me down for the first time after losing my mom, he brought up the idea of having a prophylactic surgery. And I said, are you crazy? I just got this body, why would I ever do anything to get rid of it? And I think the most important thing is having long-term perspective. And I had a really incredibly supportive family who said, look, this isn't just something that took your mother. It affected your grandmother, your great aunt, really all the women in your family on both sides. And this is something that you really need to be active and proactive about. And so I made the decision for me. I really felt as if it was not a matter of if, but it was when, and I had this looming black cloud of cancer over my shoulder. And I felt very fortunate to live in a technological age where you can undergo a prophylactic surgery like this. You can have an incredible, from a cosmetic perspective, reconstruction, particularly if you do it when you're young. And I had a great surgical team. And like I said before, a lot of family support. So I think it was having that long-term perspective, thinking about what my life would be down the road. My mom left me her journals, and in them she talked about really leaving her most precious job of raising her children unfinished, and reading those lines and thinking about getting married someday, my future husband, thinking about my future children. It really gave me that perspective that I needed to undergo a surgery like this. And now to be married, I just had my daughter a year and a half ago. I feel like I'm living in that future, and taking that preventative step was really went a long way in giving me the peace of mind that I've done the best thing I can do for myself and for my family.
I love that. Definitely puts it in perspective, especially as a mother. And speaking of which, congratulations. And
Thank you.
you have this beautiful little girl. I saw pictures. How did you approach the topic of, making these decisions? And I know you're very open about your journey with IVF. Can you talk to us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am, strangely, I always say, not a carrier of any known cancer mutation, despite having a really strong family history. But I'm a carrier of another genetic condition called Wiskott-Aldrich. And I knew my entire life that I had this. It was something that really negatively affected a lot of members of my family. And so in the last letter that my mother wrote me, she brought up the idea of undergoing IVF and having genetic testing. And it's really unbelievable to think about. This was 17 years ago that she wrote this letter. So to have the forethought to bring this up, hey, in the future, this might be a possibility for you. And again, we're so fortunate with the technology that we have now. I was able to undergo IVF, to test my embryos to make sure that they were gene-free, to undergo another panel of really extensive genetic testing to make sure that my husband and I, neither of us were carriers of genetic traits that we could pass on to our children. And so it was just a wonderful peace of mind to know that my daughter and my future children, God willing, if we have more, will not have any known gene mutations, and that I've done everything that I can as a mother to set them up for success from a health perspective. It's always a crazy thing to talk about how you do all these scientific things before your child even comes into the world. But I think it will be a wonderful thing to be able to share with my daughter someday how wanted, hoped, and prayed for she was, and that her mom did everything that she could to make sure that she was healthy.
Oh, I love that. You're giving me chills over here. She's very lucky to have you as her mom.
She's a great kid.
Yeah. And, that it hits home for me. I just became a mother myself. So listening about the risk factors and having children and the decision to have children as a woman, it's fascinating to me. And, actually with that, I think it's a good segue, Dr. Holditz. What do we know about the age, of having your first child and how that relates to breast cancer and even breastfeeding? So I have not undergone anything, but I have these crazy risk factors in my family, but it was largely because I really wanted to have the opportunity to someday breastfeed if I was able to. So it felt like a real accomplishment for me as a mother to be able to do that. So I'm curious if you can talk about that and how it helps breast cancer in some way, or, all that.
So there's two questions you asked, the age and the breastfeeding.
Yep.
The age of having a baby really comes back to the point that the modifiable risk factors that Ray was saying, from your first period on to menopause, your hormone cycle every month, cells in the breast proliferate and stop proliferating. And if that goes without having a baby, then you can accumulate damage in the DNA in breast cells. Having a baby actually pushes the breast cells through what we will call a final stage of development. After having a baby, the cells actually divide more slowly, have more time in a cell cycle to repair any damage. And by repairing damage, you lower risk of breast cancer. And there are some other things change after having a baby. Some hormone levels change that are probably also protective. And then on top of that, you asked breastfeeding. Really over 120 years ago in England, one of the women in public health looked at records and identified that women who'd had babies had lower breast cancer death than women who hadn't. And she could then look at breastfeeding and see the more children and the more breastfeeding, the lower the risk of dying from breast cancer. Well, in 1900 and 1920, there was no treatment, right? So this was a really clear signal. And obviously we've studied this and the biology, but one of the nice prevention signals coming through is that breastfeeding lowers risk of triple negative breast cancer again. So we say there's the bad subset of breast cancer. Well, here is a risk factor that anyone who has a baby usually has the chance to breastfeed, and really following the natural biology that we were set up with lowers risk of breast cancer. So that again is changing hormones, changing cell division. And in that whole piece, you mentioned at the beginning that our rates of breast cancer are going up. Globally, they're going up. The age at first period used to be up at 18 or 19. Even in rural China 30 years ago, that was still the case. High-income countries, obviously, were down at 13, 12 and going down. The age at first babies gone up from 20 to 30 and higher than 30 in high-income countries on average. So again, we've extended the number of times breast cells divide before we get the benefit of the first baby. And that's part of how the later age at first baby really accounts for this higher risk from all those cell divisions before we get the benefit.
Yeah. Well, just listening to this, being in the real world today, it's so fascinating because I feel like so many women are pushing off the decision to start their families. And maybe they should hear this conversation to maybe rethink that. But then again, we hear from Ellen, her decision with IVF and all the technology today, and perhaps by doing genetic testing, it could prevent her children from having this and carrying this forward. So, I mean, there's so many ways to look at this, and it really comes down to personal choice and what's right for the individual. And that's why this conversation is great, because people can learn all the options and what all the choices are, and then they can make an informed decision based on their circumstance. I know what was mentioned before is something I'd like to come back to. Dr. Kolgitz, do you think childhood and adolescence in particular can be a critical time that influences the future risk? Is it too late if we have reached adulthood and we have not, done anything? Can you talk about that a bit?
Sure. And again, I'll go back to it's never too late to have the changes that will lower risk. It's really the comment earlier of taking a long-term view on all of this. We're going to get the greatest benefit from the early life if we're having impact before cells go proliferate monthly without the benefit, or we've got healthy diet and high physical activity and little or no alcohol in adolescence and those earlier adult years. What we also know, and tying back to breast density, some of the lifestyle factors that may be modifiable may also be related to the development of breast density. We don't have a lot of studies there because it's really hard to assess diet when you're a teenager in school. The last thing you want to do is go into a health study that will follow you for 20 or 30 years. And we're going to thank BCRF for supporting our work, trying to look at this and disentangle how, again, high fiber diet, low animal protein, more vegetable protein leads to a slower growth, lower breast cancer risk. And we have been able to look at this, and it's lower risk of premenopausal and lower risk of postmenopausal breast cancer. So whatever's going on when we're in childhood, adolescence, and growing is actually impacting sort of a lifetime of risk. So there's definite payoff from successful healthy diet, healthy activity in our children, nieces, and so on.
And that's great, because it's something that, like we talk about, we can control that. And this discussion about dense breast is actually ringing a bell with the recent announcement of Katie Couric. She has just had a breast cancer diagnosis. And she mentioned screening, that there's specific screening necessary for people with dense breasts. So Dr. El-Ashry, can you maybe talk a little bit about dense breasts and the screening that maybe we should be asking for and demanding from our doctors?
Yes, so Katie Couric brought this out into the limelight. She also brought out another unfortunate thing, which was that she missed an actual screening. And that's another important point for anybody who's old enough to keep in mind, is to keep up with your annual screenings. But dense breasts are not something that you can actually feel that you have. It doesn't mean that they're firmer or not firm or anything that you can actually feel. It's what is in the breast, in between the breast cells themselves, which we call connective tissue, that are the non-breast cells, but that bind them all together. And increased amounts of that are what make for what we call dense breasts. And they're seen on a mammogram because they're seen as all white. They're not the breast cells themselves. And that all white masks then your ability to see something like a small mass or the calcifications that are indicative of something that a mammogram picks up, and be able then to diagnose the breast cancer. So this has become a big thing, and 38 states now have legislation that says that you need to be notified about dense breasts when you've had your mammogram, if that's what it comes up. And every mammogram has a score now of 4 levels that define the amount of density that is there. in most places, then what is recommended is secondary screening with either whole breast ultrasound or with an MRI. And both of these are more sensitive than at being able to see through dense breasts. As with everything we've talked about, though, the benefit of research is what has gotten us to be able to do all these things, to know, all the lifestyle things that Graham has been telling us about, but also all of the benefits of IVF and to continue to improve IVF with the genetic parts of it as well. And so along with that, BCRF is funding research at trying to improve the detection of breast cancers in dense breasts through a methodology called contrast enhanced mammography, whereby you do the mammogram, but you also inject something that will allow you to see blood vessels, and these blood vessels and the way they're seen can be indicative of a cancer. And so through a small pilot study, this was shown to be more accurate at detecting early breast cancers in dense breasts than either whole breast ultrasound or MRI, which both have a high rate of false positives because they are so sensitive. They see lots of things, even things that aren't necessarily cancer. And now this is rolling out and should be starting either early spring or by early summer across multiple sites, a large prospective clinical trial now of this contrast enhanced mammography called CMIST. And this is just one of the ways that BCRF continues to push for better diagnoses, better technologies, but also, better risk assessment tools as we're doing by supporting Graham and other prevention researchers.
Wow, that's incredible. I feel like this is something that will directly affect me, so it's just interesting to hear about all this. I guess for someone like me out there who is at risk or, actively screening right now, and you have one test you can go in and do right now, you're saying it wouldn't be a mammogram. You should maybe go for the MRI or the ultrasound, which is specifically if you have dense breasts, which would you recommend?
Well, I think that, and Graham can weigh in on this as well, but I think that you start with the mammogram and they tell you what your level of density is. And then based on that, you then go on and have the secondary screening. And hopefully in the future, we'll have, this better technology that's a one-stop thing, which is both a mammogram and this ability to, detect it. But I think for right now, the current path would be get your mammogram. I got my letter saying I have dense breasts. Now go back and schedule the secondary screening, and that's the path for that.
You're speaking to me.
I do just want to say that. I do just want to say that as we get to better risk assessment tools for younger women, the level of breast density in younger women below the age of 40 is even higher. And it does go down with age, but even at over the age of 40, almost 50% of women have dense breasts still.
And for everyone watching and tuning in right now, the reason I'm specifically asking these questions is because as we want to get across, early detection is the best prevention and something we really want to educate people on. And this is amazing to hear about these new technologies. And it's just another great step forward. I know they didn't have this technology available when my mother was diagnosed years ago. So, this is life-saving. It's something that will affect me and Alan, will maybe affect your daughter one day. So it's all pretty incredible. Thank you for sharing that. I want to jump in and talk back about a little bit more about what people can do, like the modified risk factors like diet and exercise. We know it can actually be pretty difficult to study. So I want to know how this research is done. Why is long-term support of this work particularly important? And what do you believe that we can learn about in the coming years?
So this is really aligning our assessment and measurement of diet, physical activity, and getting those data from late adolescents, early adult women. If we do it in real time, we can get it without any sense of bias. If we wait till a woman is 50 and had breast cancer, trying to then reconstruct what she ate in high school or earlier than high school becomes, a guessing game. And so in real time, assessing diet, activity, and maybe even those environmental exposures that are drinking water, air pollution, really hard to reconstruct those 20 or 30 years before menopause or before getting breast cancer. And BCRF has funded me for nearly 20 years now to be trying to get the timing right. We've got diet, we've got activity, we've got weight change, we've got these pre-malignant breast lesions being diagnosed. We can use modern technology to actually do a lot more than just looking at old-fashioned microscope. We can analyze the cells and the environment around the cells to understand the responses that might be driving our future breast cancer risk from having had that pre-malignant lesion, and the healthy response that actually protects women from going on from that first lesion to get breast cancer. But being able to do this in much more of a real-time assessment gives us such richer timing that we can really disentangle the contributions of these pretty complicated and interrelated, right? The way you eat, the way you exercise and weight all tie together in your metabolic profile. And maybe we need a blood sample so we can actually assess your metabolic profile at age 18 or 20. We can't go back and recreate that when you're 40 to guess what it was like in your blood supply to your breast, say, 20 years earlier.
Yes, and I would just add that the sustained supportive research is so important for so many types of research. These hits that we're having of rapid progress in precision medicine over the last 3, 4, 5 years. Targeted therapies that are as effective, if not more effective than chemotherapy, with lower side effects than chemotherapy. Those were all built on the shoulders of years upon years of foundational biological research that identified the driving factors, identified the factors to go after and target, developed the ways to go target them, and then ultimately resulted in these drugs. And then if you're talking about prevention, as you heard so eloquently from Graham about the way these kinds of studies are done, you can just imagine how then that research kind of perimeter is even extended, so that requiring even more sustained support for research. But one of the things BCRF has done in all of its support of prevention research is the Precision Prevention Initiative, which we're just finishing the first round of that funding and are just getting ready to launch a second phase of this in this next year, which was designed to bring the prevention community together and really work in multidisciplinary teams using all of the facets that we have available to us today, artificial intelligence, big data, and really bring the impact that we've seen in prevention treatments, precision treatments into the prevention arena. And so coming up with novel and artificial intelligence enhanced or driven risk assessment tools, coming up with new ways to prevent breast cancer. And so all of these avenues are how BCRF supports prevention research, because at the end of the day, while we need to be able to treat women who have breast cancer today and cure women of their metastatic breast cancer that they have today, beyond that, we need to prevent anyone from ever having breast cancer.
Yeah. Along the lines of, bringing a prevention community together, Alan, you are doing so many incredible things, and your advocacy work with the Proviver, your platform. You provide information for providers, survivors, for caretakers and families as they navigate these incredibly difficult and important health care decisions. Can you talk to us a bit about that and about the Proviver? Love to hear more.
Yeah, I underwent my preventative surgery in 2015, and it sounds crazy to say, but it was just truly still the wild, wild west of the internet when it came to advocacy, bringing women together, providing them really comprehensive information. And I had so many women reach out to me because I had this incredible viral moment, asking questions, really wanting to know sort of intimate details of my breast reconstruction and things like that. And I was happy to share, but I wanted to be able to direct them somewhere where they could learn about their options, and really be able to walk into a physician's office feeling empowered and educated, saying, hey, I think this is the best reconstruction type for my lifestyle, or just be able to ask questions. And it really was mind-blowing that there wasn't one comprehensive place. So that's sort of where the Proviver was born. I just sat myself in my living room with a laptop, built a website, and they say if you build it, they will come. And I've had a really incredible response from women in the community saying, hey, I had a sister who was diagnosed, and to be able to send your platform to her really took away some of that fear of the unknown. And she walked into a physician's office, and maybe that doctor said, oh, I only do implant reconstruction. And she said, oh, that's not the right choice for me. And what was really disheartening was to hear some situations where women would come in, say, hey, I know this is the right choice. And the physician would just push back and say, oh, no, you don't need that. I choose X type of reconstruction for you, or no reconstruction. And so I think it's knowledge is power. And if you're walking into something as challenging as a mastectomy, something as, physically strenuous, emotionally strenuous, being able to walk out saying, hey, I made the choice for myself, you're ultimately going to be happier with the decision. So very, very fortunate to be part of the platform. And it's really just an incredible community that's coming together and helping inform each other as well.
Oh, I love that. And, thank you, because I'm someone who's going to be checking out your site, and I'm sure sharing it. And, as you're bringing this up, I'm so honored to be part of this discussion and to have the Pink Agenda as an incredible community of support. This is, truly an amazing place. We just had the Pink Agenda Gala recently, which I attended, and it was so much fun. And what I love most is that, it is fun bringing together this community, because we're all, people have been touched by this disease, or we're working passionately to find a cure and spread awareness. And, it's just incredible to come together with this like-minded community, and the energy is just amazing. And it's all good people, and truly everyone just wants to live their best life, live life to the fullest, make healthy choices, protect the ones they love, and hopefully make changes for future generations, so we don't have to ever have this conversation again. But until then, I'm very grateful to be part of it. And I thank you all for your incredible work, your advocacy. As we wind up this conversation, I'd love for each of you maybe to just have any closing remarks or anything you'd like to share with our audience, or ways we can contact or get in touch with you. We'll start maybe with Dr. El-Ashry.
Yeah, so, I think what drives a lot of passion is the idea that research is the reason we will end breast cancer, and that this needs to apply to all women. And so while we focus on those who have currently breast cancer today, or we focus on where the highest incidence is, for example, with screening and screening methodologies, ultimately, everything we find needs to be available to all women, whether that's all races and ethnicities, or all ages. And so, my hope is that while current screening methods might not be the best way to find breast cancer in younger women, that with research, we will come up with better risk assessment tools more complete and refined and personalized risk assessment tools for younger women, and that we move to not solely an age-based screening guidelines, but to more risk-based screening guidelines.
And I couldn't agree more with that. The other piece that was really opening our discussion, this is 1 in 4 cancers in women in the world is a breast cancer. So we've really got to make all these advances and be able to convert them to accessible to women wherever they are in the world, not just with our research high-tech starting point. Yeah, we start there, we make the discoveries, and then BCRF and others invest in part in how do we translate this to women everywhere. That really is sort of the code for me, on top of all the things we've discussed, that there's just an amazing opportunity if we can make these discoveries and translate them, and all the way through to the precision, if you will. We can get the right prevention to the right woman at the right time in her life, instead of this, if you're not 40, you can't have a mammogram. And I would call it a sledgehammer approach to prevention that we started with years and years ago.
Yeah, and I think if I had one more thing to say, if there's anyone out there who's watching, we're talking about prevention and they may be in the position where they carry a gene mutation or have a strong family history, there's no need to be scared, because we have so many incredible options. There are wonderful organizations like the Pink Agenda, so many resources now that we have. So really just check out your options. Support amazing groups like the Pink Agenda, BCRF, because they are the ones that are really leading the charge to make a difference for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight for this TPA Talks, Understanding the Risks of Breast Cancer. Please refer to the Pink Agenda's website for more information about upcoming events and future TPA Talk events like this one. And remember, you can text TPA Talks to the number 44321 to support the Pink Agenda and life-saving breast cancer research that it funds, that we've heard so much about tonight. Thank you all for always keeping the Pink Agenda and breast cancer research in your agenda. Just want to say thank you to everyone and wish you a good night and rest of your evening. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.